This podcast is powered by the pros at Paschal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPaschal.com.
Chuck, we had a chance to listen to Coach Pittman yesterday, and one of the things that stood out to me is he is not a fan of moving from 85 to 105 scholarships like the NCAA is apparently proposing. What are, from the coaches you've talked to, you talked to a lot of head coaches in college football, do they share the same sentiment that Coach Pittman kind of shared yesterday?
I would have to say that it's the cap of it. It's not necessarily the scholarships. It is the cap that if you eliminate the walk-on program or you, like, honestly, it's a roster cut down just like the NFL, which is the phrase we keep hearing. That's what they don't want. We all know, like, the hustle, and I give them credit, by the way. It's not criticism. The hustle that BYU came up with, the Mormons of all people, when Name, Image, Likeness started, their angle was coaching staff. Any recruit that you deem worthy of a scholarship, don't worry about that 25 or that 85. We'll give them a name, image, likeness deal in addition to all the other stuff to cover the exact to-the-dollar amount of the – you have unlimited scholarships now. BYU had 127 players on full scholarship last year. That's what their name, image, likeness did. So that's the goal, is to reel that in and say, I don't care if you give them – you don't have to give them out. It's called permissive legislation. But you can give out up to 105, but no matter what you do, you're not going to have more than 105 kids in your program. That's what the coaches don't like.
Yeah, and he spoke to, in his own program, Grant Morgan, just a few years ago. We obviously saw Cody Schrader running wild in the SEC, two Burlsworth award winner. Yeah, and that's one of those things where I think a lot of not just Arkansas fans, but coaches and other fans are frustrated by this potential rule and change.
Yeah, and I mean, even you think about 12th man, and honestly, I mean, Texas A&M, I watch them sometimes. I'm like, you need to, like, filter out, like, 40% of your traditions. But the 12th man is, like, that's a thread. That's a fiber. And so it really does. It really is going to be an adjustment, I'll say. The days of Nebraska, like, if we go back to when Osborne was still there, like, their weight program, there ain't no players in Nebraska. So what they would do is they would have, like, I don't know, 115, 120 walk-ons, and they would work out everybody for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then by the end of it, go back and look at some of those all-conference linemen. Those were folks that they just put in 3 or 4 years of investment, and then they turned into a Nebraska football player. Ain't doing that anymore. So that's a real big adjustment for everybody.
So, Chuck, if you go through with the additional scholarships, and that means full cost of attendance, and we're just talking football. I mean, this is an increase of somewhere like 55 or 60 scholarships on campus, but let's just focus on football. Then we're going to have revenue sharing. Then we got to raise money for NIL. Where's it all come from?
What a great question. And here is the answer. And by the way, this has always been baked into it. And I'm not trying to sound sinister here, but this is the truth. The Big Ten and the SEC, this is a long play for them. They are going to cleave away every other conference that ain't them. And if you don't think it's happening, it was Power 5. What'd they do last year? Cleaved off the Pac-12. The Big 12's next. The AC's, they're actually going to be in their own little fun thing over there in the Big 12, but it's not going to be competing for actual football. It's going to be like, do you ever watch the USFL or the Arena League or the Canadian League? And you think, hey, that's kind of fun football. But it's not the real professional football that we care about. Think of the Big Ten as the AFC and the SEC as the NFC. Like, that's basically what we're going to come down to. We have these two conferences that we actually care about. Those are the games. And if on a Thursday night you happen to be watching Hamilton and Montreal, well, that's fine. But that's not the real football we care. That's what we're heading towards. Now, I'm going to tell you what you said about the money here. That's a great point. What a lot of people don't either realize or think about, you don't just, like, the AD doesn't call the English department and say, we got 25 more freshmen, save some seats. They have to write a check to the school. So, like, literally, there's money coming out of the athletic department that goes over to pay for tuition and books. Like, that's a legit expense. And so then a fan will think, well, wait a minute, that means a school like Marshall or UAB or South Alabama, but they won't be able to keep playing. And Greg Sankey will look at you and go, yes. Yes, we understand. like the goal is to get rid of them. Where does the money come? The money comes when you stop giving Tulsa and Memphis some of it. So that's the ultimate goal, and they're looking at this, and people are going, oh, my gosh, clutch the pearls. What will happen to Western Michigan? And Greg Sankey looks at you and says, yes, we know. Like, what we consider a bug, it's a feature to them. Yeah. Like, this has always been the plan, I promise you.
Chuck Oliver, he's in Atlanta, covers college football year-round. So let's go down that hole a little bit, and what you're really talking about is more conference realignment, more expansion for some leagues perhaps, and the two schools everyone's talking about, and the one big move left is Clemson and Florida State. Get the crystal ball out here. What happens to them, and what happens to them also goes to answer what happens to the ACC, I presume.
Oh, yeah. Y'all want to have a fun exercise? Like, really, like, and be critical and really think about this. Outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, how many really valuable athletic brands are in college football right now? Because, by the way, basketball doesn't matter. And we keep saying, oh, what about Duke and Kansas? Yeah, you remember when the Pac-12 years ago was about to absorb the Big 12? Kansas was like 30 minutes away from not having a conference, and that's real. Like, so we don't care about basketball because basketball don't pay. I've got about 5. One of them's Notre Dame. One of them's Clemson. One of them's Florida State. There's like 5 or 6 maybe properties. Okay, well, how many more properties do we need to get the SEC and the Big Ten each to 20? Well, we need about 5 or 6. So I think that at some point in the next, I don't know, half dozen years or so, by like 2030, the plan for disintegration from the ACC is going to – I'm not trying to sound fatalistic. I mean, this is the kind of thing that 10 years ago we were going, oh, my gosh, Christian McCaffrey's not playing in the Sun Bowl. How will, we just move along. Like the headlines change, and the next one is going to be there's no more ACC. If you're old enough, I mean, the Southwest Conference probationed itself into non-existence. They had Heisman winners. They had national champions. They had Darrell K. Royal. And the Southwest Conference, it hadn't been around for 30 years. College football's continued. So the ACC is going to be this thing we used to watch. It's going to be like Raycom. And so a few of the programs will come out. Florida State, though, they're getting bopped on the nose a little bit. Did we all see those comments from Petitti at the Big Ten? He was really clear about research universities and your AAU standings, and Florida State's got to have somewhere to go. They're not holding 2s and 7s, but they also don't have a full house. I mean, they're not quite as high and mighty as they think, but all this will happen in the next 5 or 6 years.
Clemson's, I believe, a private university, and I think a little more prestigious academically, if I remember correctly, Chuck. So maybe that is more likely to end up in the Big Ten. I don't know how much that's saying, but I'd be curious again, if Petitti's saying that, if how much academics actually play within that philosophy.
Yeah, and so, well, that's the thing is that Miami is private, and that's the cool thing. Have we noticed that Miami and UNC, that phrase they use is public Ivy. They want to pretend they're Duke, but they're public. But they are a highfalutin, smarty-pants school. UNC and Miami have, for the most part, been sitting out on the sides and letting Clemson and Florida State be ugly in public about it.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, if you notice. For Clemson, it has mostly been, it's just business, guys. Just give us the number. Like, they saw SMU rang the dinner bell. Didn't they raise like $150 million in a day and a half?
That was insane. And
okay, and Clemson's looking around going, wait a minute, I bet we could do that. They literally, that next week, they went to the ACC, like, guys, just give us a number. Florida State, it's gotten personal. And so that's going to be the most redneck thing ever. I grew up in the South. Arguing in the front yard, okay? I'm like, just go in the house. Florida State's going to argue in the front yard with the ACC. Like, that's where we are.
That's a good way to look at it. We're talking with, again, Chuck Oliver does afternoons in Atlanta, does Chuck Oliver Show, college football, 365 days a year. Chuck, speaking of the Big Ten, Michigan reportedly from this guy from the Wolverine, Chris Ballas, that they could possibly face some stuff from the NCAA, including a postseason ban for 1 or 2 years. One, do you think this will ever pan out? And two, do you think this is another reason maybe while Jim Harbaugh was trying to get out the door and head to the National Football League?
Oh, God, yes. Like, can we go back? When did Pete Carroll, like, how long has it been since he got out of USC? Like, just ahead of the posse. Like, that's exactly what Harbaugh was doing. Great question. How does this play out? Doesn't it have to play out with some sort of penalties? Because if it doesn't, like the NCAA, after Virginia and Tennessee's attorney generals kind of swung at them, the NCAA's like palms up. All right, we surrender. We're not going to try to enforce anything to anybody. If you can't enforce this, like honestly, if you have somebody from one school dressed in the other school's clothes on their sideline stealing their plays, like if there's not a penalty for that, is there anything else that, like at that point, I don't know, like do we pay off refs? If there's not a penalty for this, then I think the NCAA, it's a very public declaration that like literally do whatever you want.
Chuck, let's circle back to the Razorbacks. Bobby Petrino's running the offense. Taylon Green's come from Boise State. They've rebuilt the offensive line compared to last year's. What are your thoughts, and what's your how do you think Arkansas can do this year with a pretty rugged home schedule and maybe a little more opportunity on the road this year in the SEC for the Razorbacks compared to their 4 home games?
Okay, I am not looking at this through Razorback glasses, but I'm going to tell you, there is a chance. A lot of stuff's got to go right. There's a chance, at least, for a end of September, you roll into Arlington 4-0. It ain't easy, and you may be hanging on for dear life. But at Oklahoma State, that's not so horrible. And then at Auburn, pains me to say, that's not so horrible.
Auburn grad, by the way, for those that don't know.
Oh, yeah. So there is a chance. Now, Texas A&M, that's a bone to be chewed. Then Tennessee rolls in. So, like, none of the – oh, and by the way, here comes some LSU. I mean, you may just be looking at Mississippi State as we need somebody to treat like a pinata. Like, it may be a tough 3 or 4 stretch after that. There is a chance that you come out. I'm going to tell you, the weird thing is I watched Arkansas. It's like a colander on defense in some seasons. They were not good last year, but they were better. And I'm like, okay, well, that shows that they could be better this year. And I was talking with Ty that I like the defensive line. I really do. And it's not just Landon Jackson out there who, like, produces in the SEC, like, better than anybody else who's coming back on the defensive line. And some voters didn't notice him at all, and then some put him as second or third team. It just blew my mind a little bit. Is that, by the way, can I ask y'all something? I was talking about Landon Jackson. I'm like, how did y'all not see him? How is he not a first-team guy? Isn't this what's missing? Like, where around the SEC is Godzilla and Rodan coming off the edge? Like, where is Jadeveon Clowney? Where is that big monster mean end that's like 12 sacks?
Yeah.
I don't see Will Anderson in the SEC this year. That's the one thing I was like, there's something missing this year. There ain't no Arden Key.
Yeah. Harold Perkins might be the closest, and he's not coming from the spot you mentioned. I mean, when you think about headline defensive guys, particularly in the front 7, you're right about that. Arkansas lost 5 games last year by a possession or less. They did get some defensive scores, as you mentioned. They were serviceable on defense. Is Bobby Petrino enough to make a difference in those close games? Is he worth a touchdown a game just calling the plays?
Could be. He is. I mean, it's been a minute, but what he did at Arkansas was real, and it's not like he forgot how to call plays. There was a funny thing. Did y'all see the comments? Gene Chizik came back to work for Mac the second time, and going into his second season, he admitted this, and I was like, I don't know if I'd have said this. He said, being away for 5 years or whatever, I came back. It took me a full season to understand what was going on. Like, he literally said the game changed so much in 5 years that North Carolina's defensive coordinator didn't really understand what was going on. And he said some of the rules were new, too. I was like, holy smokes. I don't think that's happened to Bobby Petrino. But he's not operating with, like, this is not an even amount of talent. You mentioned the offensive line. It's last year what I saw, and it's totally different folks now, but you mentioned in the close games, and my mind went, oh my God, that BYU thing. There were home games where Arkansas had the lead and the timeouts and possession, and then, like, the final quarter didn't look like any of that was true. And it's all new, and it will be better I don't know anybody who brings in an OC, and then after like 6 or 7 games, it's like, okay, that was a mistake. And so that was Dan Enos, and here comes Petrino. I'm excited about it.
Last thing, Chuck, before we let you go, it seems like that the oxygen in the room has been sucked out by Arkansas basketball. I think Cal's, who also had a press conference this week along with Sam, was paid more attention to than what Sam had to say yesterday. Could that be a benefit for Arkansas football flying under the radar, or is that just a nothing burger as we let you go.
That's interesting. Don't we all look at Dave Doran at NC State and think, hey, he's put together a pretty solid program? Go back and look, and I want y'all to do this. Go look at either the last regular season or tournament or whatever wins for men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball. It's like 1979, 1983, 1988. And then this year, what did you get? Women's team Final Four, men's team Final Four, baseball, College World Series. Suddenly Dave Doran's looking around going, damn, I've been the best guy here, and now the pressure's on me. I think that's what it is. I think Arkansas, what I grew up, this is so weird. I grew up indoor track. I was like, Arkansas is good at it. How does a kid in Georgia, because you're elite at that stuff? Basketball, I was like, Arkansas is great at it. We saw baseball this year. Football is supposed to be in that group too. I think it shines a light on it, actually. I really do.
Well, hopefully it's one of the things, the rising tide lifts all boats. Seems like the baseball program's been there a while, just had some couple of seasons that ended prematurely in some people's minds. Well, Chuck, we'll leave it there, man. We appreciate you joining us this morning, and we'll catch up as we get closer to football season.
Yeah, thank y'all. I appreciate the invite, man. Thank y'all.
All right, Chuck Oliver with us here on the Morning Rush. You can find him online at his show every afternoon online, and if you're in Atlanta, check him out. Really good.
6 hours of radio every day,
Ooh.
11 to 1 and 3 to 7.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.